Hi everyone, today we're getting started with our first composer bio for the Romantic era, and that's Schubert. This should be a fairly short video since there's not much that the RCM actually needs you to know for Schubert compared to, say, Mozart. Our generalized Romantic period dates are 1825 to 1900, and Schubert's dates are 1797 to 1828, so you can see that he mostly lived in the classical period, yet we consider him to be this Romantic composer. However, perhaps more accurately, we consider him to be a bridge composer who we see as being more romantic than classical, as opposed to a bridge composer like Beethoven, who we see as being more classical than romantic. Here's our guy, Franz Schubert. Now we're returning to a location that has to be very familiar to you by now, and that's Vienna. This is where Schubert was born, and in a lot of ways Schubert's early life is quite similar to that of Haydn, but one major advantage that Schubert had is that he was born in Europe's musical epicenter. His dad was a school teacher and also something of a musician, and between Schubert's brother and their father, Schubert received his earliest musical education, learning both violin and piano. Schubert came from a big family of 14 kids, although 9 died in infancy. Despite that tragic loss, however, there were enough musicians in the family to form a family string quartet, and Schubert, our Schubert that is, played the viola in it. In 1804, he catches the attention of one Antonio Salieri. Yes, that's Salieri, Mozart Salieri, who would go on to tutor Schubert in composition. 1808, he's accepted to the Imperial Seminary as a choir boy due to his excellent singing voice. Now, this Imperial Seminary choir is what is now known as the Vienna Boys' Choir. In 1814, Schubert becomes a school teacher, following in his dad's footsteps. Nevertheless, he continues to compose with such songs such as Gretchen am Spinnrad and Erlkönig coming at the end of his teenage years. He was also a freelancer, but didn't make much money at all and lived the life of a starving artist, or, as it sounds much sexier to say, a bohemian artist. He had very few belongings, most of which were just some clothes and his sheet music. He was quite unhappy during this time in his life, although that's a very big understatement. It's now believed that Schubert suffered from cyclothymia. In fact, it's more than just believed, it's almost certain that he suffered from cyclothymia. As something of a side note, in the summer of 1818, Schubert worked as a music teacher for the Esterházy family. Again, this nice little link to Haydn. While Schubert never really found mainstream success during his lifetime, he did have some significant admirers. For example, Johann Michael Vogel, who is shown on the left in this caricature, with Schubert on the right. Vogel was a famous baritone who bolstered Schubert's position in the Vienna music scene and was part of a group of folks who were big proponents of Schubert's work. Of these proponents was the wealthy and influential Sonnleitner family, spelled Sonnleitner, and these folks threw musical parties which became known as Schubertiads, and this is seen depicted on your screen. Now, the RCM says that in 1827, Schubert visited Beethoven before Beethoven's death. However, from what I can tell, there's no real conclusive evidence that this ever actually occurred. Nevertheless, it is known that Schubert was just a massive fan of Beethoven's. He was even one of the torchbearers at Beethoven's funeral in 1827. The following year, 1828, specifically on November 19th, 1828, Schubert passes away at only 31 years old. It's not entirely sure what killed him. Some say typhoid, some say syphilis. There's a multitude of other thoughts about this. Nevertheless, he was already known to be this fairly unhealthy young man. And the end of his life came much, much too early. He was buried near Beethoven's grave, and in 1818 the remains were moved to the Pantheon of Musicians at the Central Cemetery of Vienna, and they now rest side by side. Next time we're going to be looking in detail at Schubert's musical style and contributions. Thank you very much for listening.